The first memory I have is about death. I was 4 years old, holding my mother's hand as we walked to church with my grandmother. My mother wore high heels and a deep green dress dotted with bright red cherries like little jewels. As we passed a street, I saw a park across the road with swings and a slide. I instantly wanted to go there. I yanked my hand free from my mother's and darted into the street. She screamed and ran after me, but it was too late. I stepped onto the road just as a gray truck sped around the corner. Don't worry, it didn't hit me. The truck screeched to a halt, tires grinding against the pavement to avoid me. I stood on one side, my mother on the other. Between us was the massive truck like a sudden wall. In that chaotic moment, I had just enough time to keep running toward the park. I no longer heard my mother's screams. Fear had turned to anger. I bolted under the shade of a large, drooping tree, eyes fixed on the swing. My goal grew closer with every small step. Then, as if everything had just begun, I tripped and rolled across the ground, staining my best Sunday clothes with grass and dirt. I was being chased. Below the tree, my friends cheered wildly. I was unbeatable at time tag, holding the title all summer. But today, my crown was at risk. Jack was close behind. The game was down to just us two, and my wristwatch showed I only needed to evade him for 23 more seconds to win. But why, I wondered as my knee bled from scraping bark, did I choose to climb this stupid tree? Other questions swirled. Who am I? Where's my mother? Why am I so much bigger? We kept climbing higher. Jack nearly touching me. Only 14 seconds left. I slid along a branch, reaching for another nearby. Instead of grabbing it, my foot slipped on slick bark, and I fell. It felt like my stomach dropped faster than the rest of me. I hadn't realized how high I'd climbed. I hit the ground not with a thud, but with a far worse sound. I landed on my back, feeling my ribs shatter on impact. There was no pain, just a strange tightness in my chest, like a giant python squeezing me. I'll need a hospital, but my parents have no money. How could I be so stupid? My father will kill me. I thought faintly, if I don't die right now. I dimly saw the swing still swaying in the summer breeze, my friends gathering around me, eyes wide with shock. As my consciousness returned, a sharp beep pierced the silence like a knife, signaling I was still the undefeated tag champion. I woke under the shade of a large elm tree, my mind spinning, utterly confused. A scream somewhere startled me awake. Sitting up, I saw the gray truck's driver rushing toward me. Behind him was my mother, barefoot, clutching her red high heels. She dropped them when she reached me, cupping my face with both hands, eyes wide with panic. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice trembling. "What happened to you?" "I tripped," I said, because it seemed the only sensible thing to say. Honestly, I had no idea what had happened. I hadn't even begun to understand it. My mother sighed with relief, pulling me into her arms, hugging my head tightly. "Never do that again," she said, her breath still rapid. "I won't, Mom," I whispered back. That was the first time I died, and it was far from the last. It's strange the things you can't predict when you're just an 8-year-old kid. Though I never told anyone, I vividly remember that bizarre, terrifying experience from that fateful day on the way to church. Like every kid in town, I was warned about the dangers of climbing trees through the tragic story of Queen Pleasance, a local child who died years ago after falling from a tree. That story was always told by adults as a caution. There was a faint connection between what happened to me and Queen's story, but I didn't see it, not yet. Things began to change in the summer of 2009. I was walking with my best friend Caden on Main Street in Swiss Knife, the town I still call home, though I left over 10 years ago. If you're wondering about the odd name, it comes from the Swiss Knife River. If you ask why the river's called that, I don't know. I'm not an encyclopedia. We'd just left the Sticky Shoe movie theater, a name locals both knew and loved for our rundown cinema. No, don't ask why it's called Sticky Shoe. It was a hot summer day, the streets blazing, but the movie was amazing, leaving us thrilled. Still mixed with that excitement was a cold, eerie feeling I couldn't name. The past few months had been rough for my family, so bad that my mother hinted we might leave Swiss Knife for good. My father barely spoke to me anymore. He wouldn't look at me because of it. A bitter silence hung between them, an emotion I wouldn't understand until years later. Back then, I only knew my summer days with Caden at Sticky Shoe might end, making them so precious they almost choked me with regret. But that July afternoon, those worries faded, buried under the sunlight, as Caden and I walked down Main Street, eagerly discussing the movie. No, the best part was when Caden started, then stopped dead laughing. Oh man, I just got a whole wave of goosebumps. I turned to say something. Weird, it's burning hot out here. But before I could say the word outside, the world vanished. I was yanked into a strange scene in my mind, a completely different world. Caden was gone. In his place was a beautiful teenage girl holding my hand, smiling brightly. I realized I was much taller with tanned, muscular arms where there'd only been pale, freckled skin before. She smiled at me and I smiled back, though my mind was in chaos. We were in Swiss Knife on the familiar stretch of Main Street. The night air carried the chill of early fall. The street was quiet, with only a few figures ahead leaving Cinema 6, a new theater in town that didn't exist before. I didn't care much. I was walking beside her who I thought was my girlfriend. Her name echoed in my mind, strangely familiar, though I was sure I'd never met her. The way I thought of her, the most amazing girl, felt alien too. Grown up. The more I thought, the more something felt wrong. A vague unease crept into my chest like a hazy warning. Then I saw it. Blinding headlights roared toward us from across the street like a white storm. I didn't see the driver's face, only the car, a sleek, massive, heavy vehicle charging at terrifying speed, slamming straight into us. The impact was beyond imagination. It crushed us, then smashed us into the brick wall of the pizza shop behind. I was trapped in that moment, suspended between life and death. I felt no pain, only my body hurled like a shadow. She vanished from sight, leaving only her bright yellow shoe flying to one side. In the chaos, I smelled gasoline mixed with hot pizza. My head hit the warped manhole cover and my vision blurred. My final thought flickered. Will I recover in time for the homecoming game this weekend? Hey, wake up! I opened my eyes back on Main Street. My head throbbed like it was splitting, and Caden knelt beside me, shaking my shoulder. I sat up, clutching the back of my head. What just happened? I'm not sure, Caden said, eyes worried. You just passed out. Your head hit the ground hard. Ow, I muttered, tears springing up from the pain and what I'd just experienced. It felt so real. Too real. Come to my house, Caden suggested, probably to distract me. We've got popsicles. 3 nights later, my mother's mother, my grandmother, came over. That day, my father had moved to a hotel. It felt odd to me because hotels were for Disneyland or vacations, not a random weekday. My grandmother lived nearby and came to help my mother, who'd been crying a lot lately. I didn't fully understand what was happening, only that it wasn't happy, but I knew my mother well enough not to ask too much. Still, one thing nagged at me. Grandma, I asked over dinner, have you lived here your whole life? In Swiss Knife. Yep, since I was about 14. Right the summer after 8th grade, my father got a job at the factory, so we all moved here, and I've been here ever since, she said, slipping into her familiar nostalgic tone. Oh, do you know Mr. B? I mean Mr. Will Fork down the street. We rented his basement for a year while my father built our house. That was, maybe 68, or never mind, my head's not as sharp as it used to be. Her answer was like always, starting with a simple question, veering into 5 unrelated stories, and ending with a gentle complaint about her memory. Has anyone ever been hit by a car on Main Street, I asked, trying to sound casual. I mean a long time ago near Sticky Shoe. Oh my, yes, she replied, her eyes lighting up as the memory rushed back. A horrible accident. You know it was Cy Prentice and a boy with her. Oh, she wasn't a Prentice then, of course. What was her old name? Oh, doesn't matter. They were hit by some out-of-town driver. He was so drunk my mother cut in, clearly displeased. But that's the truth, my grandmother continued, indignant. He killed himself and took that football-playing boy with him. Died on the spot, if I recall. She turned to me, her voice softening. You must have seen what happened to poor Cy. I stared, confused. Mrs. Prentice, my mother said gently. The lady at church. My eyes widened. Mrs. Prentice, the old woman in the wheelchair at church every Sunday since I was little. Was that her? The beautiful girl who held my hand under that night sky? In my head, scattered memories, ones I didn't even know I had started piecing together, forming something strange but real. Why are you asking such an odd thing? My grandmother asked, tilting her head. I shook my head, partly to answer, partly to shake off the horrific sound of Queen Pleasant's ribs shattering in my memory. Just curious, I said softly. Can you pass the corn? I never told Caden what really happened to me that day on Main Street. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't get the chance. 3 weeks later, my mother and I left Swiss Knife. We moved to another small, worn-out town full of people who'd lived there nearly forever. I guess every place has towns like that. This one was called Wheeler, a plain name for a place that was my whole world, at least through a child's eyes. Wheeler had a main street too, but no cheap movie theater. Actually, no theater at all. 10 months passed since I last saw my father. At first, I told myself he was just busy with work, but I soon realized he wanted nothing to do with me. I was angry at him for a long time. Then years later, my mother let slip while drunk that he wasn't my real father. Oddly, part of me felt relieved. She started drinking heavily after we moved to Wheeler, even on the first day in our new rented house. It was a big rundown place, once a hospice before being converted. I unloaded most of our stuff from the U-Haul myself with help from Derek, some weird guy my mother hired to move things while she sipped wine from a never-empty glass, directing us like a drunken film director. Since moving to Wheeler, there were always a few strange guys lurking around, but things like that slipped past a 9-year-old's mind. So life in Wheeler slowly became normal. I started at a new school, made new friends, and my grandmother came over for Sunday dinners. One evening, she stumbled up the walkway carrying a large crate. I ran to the door to help. "What's that?" I asked, taking the crate. It was a big cage, but I didn't need an answer. Tiny barks from inside told me. It was Chuck, a 10-week-old husky. I loved him instantly with all my heart. Chuck didn't replace a father, but he kept me busy, and maybe that's all a kid really needs sometimes. I fed him, trained him, walked him, cleaned up his messes. I clipped his nails, watched for any signs of trouble, and booked vet appointments when needed. In return, Chuck gave me absolute loyalty and a simple, radiant love only a puppy can offer. There was one strange thing. Chuck didn't like the house, or rather, he didn't like parts of it. I couldn't understand why. He'd jump on my bed without hesitation, but avoided the living room sofa like it was spiked. He'd whine oddly at a spot on the kitchen floor, and he flat out refused to enter my mother's bedroom. At first, I thought it was just a quirky puppy habit, but one fall day in 2011, I started to realize it might not be that simple. I'd just come home from school now in 5th grade. As usual, Chuck greeted me at the door, licking me with all his usual excitement and love. I dropped my backpack, grabbed a glass of ice water from the fridge, and headed upstairs. Chuck trotted beside me, but when I turned into the long hallway to my bedroom, he stopped and let out a soft whimper. "What's wrong, little guy?" I asked. Chuck crouched paws up, staring at the closed door next to my room, the living room. "Yeah, I know you don't like that room," I said with a shrug, turning to walk to my room. But a few steps later, I heard a low growl behind me. Chuck was growling something he'd never done before. I turned back, frowning. Chuck stood tense, body rigid, still staring at the door. Something's off. I stood still, watching the door for a moment. My mother called softly, not wanting to disturb. I wasn't sure if she was home. I'd long stopped trying to track her schedule. Chuck edged toward the door, then backed away, tail tucked. My heart pounded, choking me. I swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and with a sweaty, trembling hand opened the living room door. I froze. It was clearly the living room. Same ceiling, same windows, same old dent in the far wall. But it was different. So different. The walls were covered in ugly cream and blue wallpaper completely foreign. The bed was there, but it had a rusty metal frame, the white blanket perfectly smooth, untouched. On the floor by the bed was a dark stain that felt utterly wrong. I wasn't pulled in like at the park or Sticky Shoe, but the feeling was the same, like I'd opened a door to a memory that wasn't mine, standing at its edge, almost sucked in like holding my breath for a sneeze that wouldn't come. Bark. Chuck's loud bark snapped me out of it. I blinked rapidly, chest-heaving, hands shaking. I looked around. It was the living room. Really, the living room, navy blue wallpaper, my parents' old bed, the small brown dresser. My grandmother gave us everything as it always was. But a question hooked into me like a sharp claw. What happened in this room? The answer existed, and it was toxic, more horrifying than anything I'd imagined. I wouldn't start to understand until 10 months later, July 2012. I remember that day clearly because Wheeler had just opened a new modern movie theater, but I didn't dare go. A horrific shooting at a Colorado theater had just shaken the country. I started thinking seriously about what I'd seen, the deaths, the memories that weren't mine, but felt like I'd lived them. Why did these images appear? Why was I the one to see them? There had to be a reason, and I decided to find it. So I made a choice. I wouldn't sleep in my room anymore. I moved to the living room, laying an old, lumpy mattress by the bed. There, I'd wait for answers. I started the night more dramatically than I'd admit now, lighting candles around the room and whispering the only Latin words I knew, E pluribus unum. I briefly considered sprinkling salt in a circle on the floor, but thought of cleaning each grain from the wood cracks and gave up. With my limited knowledge from borrowed horror movies, I felt I'd set up a pretty formal seance. I hoped the atmosphere would draw any ghost willing to share their death story with me. Nothing happened. I fell asleep disappointed near dawn after hours of staring at the moonlight quietly hitting the old dent in the wall. I woke in the dark, groggy, confused why the window was on the wrong side of the room. Then I remembered I was in the living room. As I went to rub my eyes, I snapped awake at a strange sight. My hand was wrinkled, speckled with liver spots. I tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through my spine, making movement nearly impossible. My body felt heavy, exhausted in a strange way, like death was one breath away. There was no fear, just a heavy, tired acceptance. The parties have faded, it's time to go. I thought of those who'd gone before my parents, my husband, old friends. Maybe it's time to join them. Nothing unusual about that. So why were my hands sweating? Why was my frail old heart pounding like it wanted to escape my chest? I was scared, even terrified, but I couldn't remember why. The door creaked softly, clicked, and opened. A woman stepped in the embodiment of fear. Death didn't scare me, but her presence did. The woman in white. "Hello, Dorothy," she said softly, a faint smile on her beautiful face. Why was she so beautiful? It'd be easier if she looked gruesome like I'd imagined. But no, she was strangely, coldly beautiful. I tilted my head, trying to see behind her where she pushed a metal cart. On the tray were familiar tools, needles, glass vials, and surgical blades, sharp as razors, all gleaming cold, silent. I couldn't recall details, but I remembered the screams of others. "No," I whispered. "Please don't. Hush now, Dorothy." The woman in white said, her voice soothing. She closed the door, locking it with a chilling click. "It'll only hurt a little. I guess this is where I tell you about Ms. V. Ms. Vans was my 8th grade history teacher. Most students loved her, and it's easy to see why. She was kind, funny, and clearly loved teaching. Though older, she was strikingly beautiful in a way that distracted me from her lessons, and I didn't know why. I never liked her. For a long time, that was a mystery even to me. It wasn't because she did anything wrong or was unfair to me, quite the opposite. But something about her unsettled me like background music, clashing with a movie scene. All year, our class studied state history until recently when the topic shifted to family history. Ms. V called it a history everyone could access. She urged us to talk to our parents, grandparents, and explore our family trees. The final project was a class presentation sharing what we found. As an example, Ms. Vance prepared a presentation about her own family. She started with personal details, saying she grew up in Wheeler, raised by a single mother, and never married. Though she had a grown son living far away, her slides moved from his photo to her father's, then further back from modern color photos to faded sepia ones. Sadly, she said, her voice tinged with sorrow, "I never really knew my father. He disappeared when I was young. Maybe he left. Maybe something else happened. We'll probably never know, but I think every family has its mysteries." She paused to clear her throat. Anyway, my mother Edith, who I jokingly call the real Covington, still lives in Wheeler, though she's very old now. The next slide appeared, and I gasped like something punched my chest. A woman appeared on the classroom screen, classically beautiful, with a gentle smile, wearing a pristine white nurse's uniform, a beauty like from an old black and white film. But I knew better than anyone in the class that this wasn't a charming image. It was her, the woman in white. A few kids turned puzzled by my sudden sound. I quickly turned my gasp into a cough and sat still. Ms. V continued oblivious, speaking proudly of her mother, who'd been head nurse and manager at Holly Burton, a hospice for those in their final days. I heard nothing else. I zoned out, eyes glued to that photo. It was taken in the very house I lived in once, Holly Burton, and the woman in it was without doubt a murderer. From that moment, I saw the memories I experienced as brutal traces left by horrific deaths. I didn't know why I saw them or what to do with them. But I was certain Edith Vans was the most evil person to ever walk the earth. I'd learned to live with memories, ones not mine, of falling from a tree in the park or the stench of gasoline outside what'd later be called Sticky Shoe. But those memories were nothing. Nothing compared to what happened to the poor woman named Dorothy the night the woman in white entered her room. I remembered everything I'd seen, but that last one I'd never forget. And Dorothy wasn't the only one who feared her. Though her mind was foggy, her memories faint fragments. She remembered the screams of others. How many more were there? I kept that question, and the woman in white's true identity to myself for nearly 3 years. Not because I didn't want to speak, but because I didn't know what to do. No one teaches you how to handle deaths you didn't live. Not until the day my mother finally opened the pantry door. To put it mildly, our house needed repairs when we bought it years ago, but we never fixed much. The realtor mentioned a pantry as storage room, but said it had never been opened. We didn't try hard, just turned the knob a few times and gave up. Until that day when my mother's drinking outgrew the kitchen cabinets and fridge. She needed more space, and with the resolve of an addict seeking their next fix, she did what others couldn't. She opened the long locked door. "It's great to finally have a pantry," she said excitedly. "That night we just need to figure out the cold in there." Strangely cold. I waited until my mother was in her room door closed, then quietly approached the pantry. I couldn't explain why, only that I knew something was inside. Another memory a trace. I opened the door and a chill hit me, but it was a cold I knew better than Wheeler's winter air. I braced myself as I stepped in, oddly relieved that the indoor temperature dulled the outer cold. God, this place is freezing, I thought. Another chill pierced me this time, regret layering over countless others. Why did Sarah leave him here? Near the door was a mahogany coat rack. I didn't take off my coat, its lining worn, and I wore only a thin shirt beneath. I stomped my boots on the rug to shake off snow, then walked to the reception desk where an unimaginably beautiful woman looked up from her paperwork. She wore white and smiled gently like a deadly breeze. "Hello, can I help you?" she asked. I swallowed, keeping my voice steady. I knew I had to sound confident. "I'm here to pick up my father, Vernon Chadwick." The woman Edith, per her name tag, kept smiling, but something shifted in her eyes, subtle but clear. "And you are?" she asked. "I'm his daughter, Geraldine." Edith turned open a drawer and pulled out a file. "It says here, Mr. Vern was admitted by a Sarah Trevor, my sister," I said, trying to hide the contempt in my voice. "She shouldn't have left him here like this. I only just found out." "I'm sorry," Edith said, her voice devoid of regret. "But your sister paid a large sum for us to care for your father. I'm afraid I can't allow anyone but her or her husband to take him." "What if I paid?" I asked, my voice tight with desperation. I knew I didn't have the money, but that wasn't the point anymore. "You don't understand," Edith said. "We have rules, policies, paperwork that must be followed. I can't just let someone walk in and take one of my residents like it's simple. I don't even have proof of who you are." I rummaged through my tattered coat for my wallet, hoping to show her my ID. But I hadn't brought it. I'd left home the moment I learned my father was here, not thinking to grab any ID. "Can I at least see him?" I asked, my voice breaking. "He'll recognize me right away." The faint smile left Edith's face, and her beauty turned terrifying. "I'm afraid Vern won't be able to say anything," she said. "What are you talking about?" "Of course he can talk. Listen, I'm not leaving until I started, but—" She raised a hand, her face showing clear impatience. She began to speak, but our eyes met, and her expression softened suddenly. She sighed heavily. "Fine if that's the case, but you'll need to fill out some forms." She pointed to a room in the back. "You'll find an open cabinet with clipboards on the shelf. Grab one and fill out the papers." I sighed with relief, still stunned by her sudden change in attitude. Though unexpected, I had no reason to refuse, and I thought after filling out the forms I'd see him. Every muscle in me tensed as a long needle stabbed into my neck. I stumbled back, too weak to raise my arms to catch myself. My body hit the floor with a thud, my head slamming against the wood. That year I realized I was completely paralyzed. I couldn't move at all. From behind, I felt Edith's hands slide under my armpits, dragging me across the floor and dropping me roughly. Something leaked from the injection site on my neck. I didn't know if it was blood or residue from that needle. My eyes stared at the ceiling, and I heard soft sounds beside me, but my body wouldn't respond to turn and look. Then Edith knelt beside me. One hand gently turned my head, her perfectly painted nails glinting under the light. On the floor, a rug was pushed aside, revealing a trapdoor and a ladder descending into deep darkness. Once more, that gentle smile appeared on her face. "Geraldine," she hummed like a lullaby. "See that cellar? You'll die down there. All because you're an ugly, annoying woman, and I don't want to see your face again." With that, she grabbed the collar of my old torn coat and threw me into the gaping hole below. I snapped awake beside the pantry, drenched in sweat. I wasn't sure why I woke. Maybe Geraldine hit her head falling. I thought perhaps that was kinder than anything Edith had planned. I pushed myself up exhausted and looked where the trapdoor had been under the kitchen table. Now it was just smooth wooden flooring. I stepped closer to inspect, noticing a difference. Some planks were newer than the rest. Something had been there, but now it was gone. Chuck's familiar whine from the kitchen corner pulled me from my thoughts. I knew removing a basement's entrance was easy, but erasing the basement itself was not. I knew as surely as I knew my own eye color that if someone pried up that kitchen floor, they'd find a basement below with a dusty skeleton, maybe still wearing that tattered coat. And I knew one more thing. I knew what I had to do. I rang the bell. Moments later, an old woman opened the door, her face beaming with a warm smile. "Oh, come in, dear," she said warmly. "Hang your coat there," she added, pointing to a mahogany rack in the foyer. "I'm boiling water for tea. Let me get you a cup." I nodded, stepping into the spacious, tidy house. It was elegant without being showy, its furniture timelessly arranged. She gestured for me to sit on the living room sofa, then left. Soon she returned with 2 steaming teacups, her hands trembling but graceful. She sat in the armchair across from me. "It's nice to meet you, Edith," I said. "Oh, I don't know why anyone would bother with me," she said softly. "But you're a kind young man, and I'm happy to chat with you." I smiled, pulling my phone from my pocket. "Do you mind if I record this? It's easier than taking notes while talking." She hesitated briefly, almost imperceptibly, then nodded. "Yes, of course." "Great," I said. I opened the recording app, set the phone on the table, and began an interview I didn't know would end so quickly. Here we go. "As Ms. Vans, your daughter, I call her Ms. Vans, probably told you, I'm a reporter for the high school paper, The Forecaster. We're doing a feature on older community members, people who've contributed a lot but rarely get noticed or recognized. I'm definitely one of the older ones," she said with a soft laugh, pausing as if choosing her words carefully. "But I'm content with my life. I'm proud of what I've done." "I believe so." I nodded. "You know, maybe your daughter didn't mention, but I wanted to interview you specifically because you worked at Holly Burton. Did you know it's been converted into housing now?" "Oh, yes," she said, her eyes brightening slightly. "I ran that place, and Jacqueline mentioned you live there now. I think that's wonderful. I'm glad those old bones are still standing." It took me a second to realize Jacqueline was Ms. Vans, then I pressed on. No more beating around the bush. First question. Have you ever met someone angry because a loved one was placed in end-of-life care? Someone who showed up at night saying they didn't agree that they wanted, say, their father brought home. Believe me. The smile on Edith's face vanished so fast it was almost supernatural. She hesitated. "Why would you start with that question?" she asked. "Because the ghost of Vernon Chadwick's daughter, Geraldine, appeared to me and told me everything," I replied, unable to hide my eagerness. "She's still in my kitchen. You know that." I wasn't sure the ghost part was accurate, but it hit the mark. Edith froze, and you could have seen her face then. "All right," I continued. As if brushing that aside, let's skip question 1. Question 2. When you killed Dorothy, the woman who lived in what's now my living room, was cleaning up the blood hard, I asked, because she didn't show me that part. I saw the knife and guts, but I can't imagine if cleaning up was fun. I felt nauseous. Edith stammered. "Go vomit if you need to," I said gently. "But one more question first. Are you afraid of what'll happen after you die?" By now, Edith's face was as pale as the nurse's uniform she once wore. Life seemed to drain from her aging skin. "Are you threatening me?" she asked. "Oh, no," I said, shaking my head, almost cheerful. "I'm not the type to lose control, so don't worry, I won't hurt a sweet old lady like you. Oh, thanks for the tea," I added, raising the cup for a sip. I'll admit I was enjoying this more than I expected. "Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there's a bit of madness in us all. I don't even plan to drag you to court," I continued. "Sounds like a hassle. No offense, but I doubt you have much time left. I'm just curious when that moment comes. Do you think about facing them?" "Who?" Edith whispered. "The people you killed at Holly Burton," I answered as if it were obvious. "They'll be there waiting. You don't think you'll escape the consequences, do you?" "You're a sick liar," Edith said, trembling. The gentleness I'd seen in her was gone, revealing the true self hiding beneath. I wondered how she'd fooled the world with her kind old lady act. I just shook my head calmly. "How do I know all this, Edith? Ask yourself. Really ask and see if you can think of another explanation." She fell silent, eyes on her palms. Her small shoulders slumped. I stood from the chair. "I think I should go," I said. Before you try stabbing me with a needle, I'll write a great article about you, I promised. Edith glanced quickly at my phone, still recording on the table. Like I said, Edith, I'm not here to get you in trouble. I leaned down, picked up the phone. I came to take away your peace in your final days. My peace, she gasped. Yes, I replied. You didn't just kill people, Edith. You tortured them, destroyed them. Many spent their last days in fear because of you, because of your shadow entering their rooms at midnight. I don't know why you did it, but I know how they felt, and I think it's fair you live the rest of your life with that feeling. I paused, letting my words sink into the thick air. They agree, I added. Edith died just 6 months later. I attended her funeral. Thanks for the great article Ms. V said that day. My mother was so different in her final months. I'm really glad you talked to her before things got bad. My honor, I replied. Edith was special. I glanced at the body and the coffin-gray skin face, empty, feeling nothing. My condolences. I lied. I don't yet know what losing a mother feels like. It took 2 years to truly understand. My mother went out, as you might have guessed if you've read this far, a poisoned cocktail. She lay in her bed for over 36 hours before I sensed something was wrong. I emailed my professors saying I needed time to handle things. They were sympathetic. Journalism isn't the toughest major after all. I arranged her funeral. I spent months trying to sell the house, then was advised to wait that the market might improve and I'd get more if I was patient. My mother's room stayed untouched for nearly a year. I didn't enter. But a few weeks ago, I decided to sleep there. Maybe I was searching for something left of her. I found a trace, but not hers. It was Vernon Chadwick's. I slept there the next night, then the next, and so on. Chuck, my loyal, sweet dog, always avoided the room when I entered. In that room, the woman in white killed 9 people, at least the ones I know of. Each one was terrified. They knew she was coming. On the 10th night, I finally saw my mother's death. She was lucid enough to feel her heart slow, then race, then slow again. She couldn't move, her thoughts foggy. She whispered my name with a brief moment of clarity and deep regret. She was so sad, and then she was gone. In journalism class, I was taught that writing must always have a clear purpose. Never let readers wonder why. That's what professors stressed. But with this story, I truly don't know why. Maybe just because it's my story. If that disappoints you, I'm sorry. I'll leave you with something to ponder. Somewhere in this world is a place that means something special to you. You might recognize it when you get there, or maybe not. It could be as close as your bedroom or a place not yet built. Maybe under a large elm tree, a hospital bed, or a sidewalk tile outside a pizza shop on your hometown's main street. I'm talking, of course, about where you'll die. No one knows when, but death will come and it'll find you in a very specific place. You might pass it every day without knowing. You might have sat, laughed, lived there, unaware that one day all your memories, personality, and hopes will be snuffed out there like a candle starved of air. Who knows, maybe you're there right now. It sounds unbelievable, but out there is a spot just for you. It's one of the few certainties in this world, and that's not all. When you go, you might leave something behind. A faint but indelible trace. So much so that someone who never met you, maybe not even born yet, will feel a chill down their spine passing that spot years, even decades later. I know it's true. My house is one of those places with so many traces it makes me want to scream.
Thanks for watching this video. If you like this video, drop a comment below. And please like, share and subscribe my channel.